Okay, so first of all, any questions off the bat? No?
Yeah.
Good, great. Everyone's powering ahead at phenomenal rates.
I thought I had
Yeah,
something that I sent you.
yes, you have. I've just got to get those. Hang on a second. Two computers on the desk at the same time doesn't do so well, but I'll get you those questions and images. And I've got a few others that have come in where I've said to people, if you're going to call and ask me questions or you want to know the answer to something, then I'm going to have to share it with the group. So let's go there and have a look-see. And I've got to share this one. And I'm going to do the infinity share. Oh, Lisa Barnes. Is that the Lisa Barnes? If so, hello. Long time no see. It is.
Hi, Mark.
You got an Airstreamer yet? Tell me yes, please.
What was that? Sorry.
An Airstreamer yet? You were going to get an Airstreamer.
That's right. No, they're too expensive now.
Well, everything's expensive now, including arborists. So hopefully we're generally doing well financially out of the profession. Great industry to be in. So infinity share is entire screen. It says, please don't do this. I say yes and do it. Yeah, there we are. Great. So first one is a question from a gentleman by the name of Will Mittens. And Will ask the question, is this armillaria? We've got a root with a bit of an issue. Let me see if I can make that bigger for you guys. That's better, yep. So we've got a root. We'll look at a series of them. It's a tree that's failed. So we've got some loss of tissue. It's very hard to determine what we've got going on there at a macro level. But what we can see here is this is a tree that has had roots that are dead for quite some time, and you can pick that because the sapwood is missing. You can see here the sapwood's still present up higher, and this is one of the sinker roots. So is it armillaria? My gut level feeling is probably not. So here's our tree. The tree looks healthy. There's no indications of things apart from down at depth. And if I was guessing on something, see how this has got a blacky grey colour to it here and here? Let me zoom in more if I can. Come on, it should allow me to zoom in more. Why is it not? No, it's not allowing me to zoom in. But can you see that blacky hue here and even here? That blacky grey blue colour is anoxia. So there's been a shortage of oxygen. I suspect it's probably been a drainage issue at some stage rather than anything else. And you can see the tree itself. So this one's zooming in. Let me go back to that last one. Let's see if I can get it to zoom in for you. Yeah, there we are. See this? This is a blacky bluey colour here.
Yeah.
Typical of anoxia. And here and here. Very distinct. And it happens when the root's down there and there's no oxygen, it doesn't discolour. And as soon as it comes out, within a matter of, 10 or 15 minutes, it changes its colour. So that's my gut level feeling is it's had some physical damage to the roots by things becoming saturated. How will that happen on anywhere? Any thoughts? It's going to happen when we change drainage. Simply putting a road in, altering drainage from somewhere. Someone's got a property. I've got a little unit down on the coast, and we've got a water bill for this quarter, and it was $11,000. The strata, and our normal bill's about $1,100 or $1,200. So real big shock. And we said, how's that even possible? Went and found a plumber, and the plumber said, look, we found the leak. It's underneath the building. And yes, it's put the equivalent of 2 Olympic swimming pools full of water into the soil, and it's drained away. So you can see how just a little thing like that can have a huge impact. And so you can potentially end up with lots of water in spots that you previously haven't had it, just by a slight change or a leak in the system. So yeah, it's just what do you do about it? You could put a load sensor or a movement sensor on every tree that you ever look at. That seems a little bit overtaxing over there, costly for what it is. I think you've just got to accept there's some basic risk associated with trees. And if you look at this tree, in terms of the damage, it's a removal. It doesn't look like it's done much in the way of damage. So, no harm in many ways, regardless of what was happening. So that one was from Will Mittens. Thanks, Will, for sending that one in. I don't know whether Will's online. I just closed down my Outlook. No, I didn't. Our next one comes in, and again, can't remember who it was, but somebody a week or two ago sent me some pictures and said, look, I've got a pyrus that's got some damage, poisoning. And I thought, oh yeah, Mum, I'm always skeptical. So I wanted a little bit more than just a discussion about whether they thought it might have been. Some photographs, just a bit of marginal necrosis, and that didn't convince me particularly. They are there, but this does. This is the Makita borer, okay? Makita spiralingus just drills its way in, fills it up with usually some form of chemical. And in this case, it doesn't look like it's systemic. So what sort of thing could you use? I'm not going to say. And the reason I'm not going to say is I don't want anyone to start doing this sort of stuff. But, there's a lot of chemicals that you can use that damage trees. And I just find it a heinous thing. New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, it is a criminal offence to poison someone else's property. I don't think there's ever been a successful prosecution. No, that's not true. I know at least one prosecution, but not one under the Crimes Act. The prosecution was under the Pesticides Act for the misuse of a pesticide. And so this is not your typical poisoning that we'd see from glyphosate or Roundup. This is something else, a lot more localized, a lot less systemic. And Peter, can you remember who that was from?
Not offhand, but it's...
That was me, Mark.
It was Matthew, was it? Yeah, thanks, Matthew. I'd like to say it's something I don't see very often, but the last time I saw it was today. And it was a 70 to 80-year-old Eucalyptus pilaris, 1.1 meters in diameter. And, it's someone who's just decided they need a view more than someone needs their tree. And the tree was poisoned. The council came out, looked at it and said, no, don't know what's happened to it, don't know why it's happened. And I got there, and it was just 2 or 3 months after the council had been there, and there was enough time for the bark that they'd mixed into the end of the silicon, white silicon that they filled the hole with. So they drilled, poisoned, plugged the hole, and then put shavings into the plug. And the shavings had worn away enough that I could just pick the round shape of the hole. saw the first one. Once I saw the first one, it was just a matter of going around and looking for the rest of them. And indeed, they're a lot easier to find once you've found the first one, because you're looking for something that's fairly well concealed. And we're able to find, I think there's about 8 or 9 holes in the tree. Another place that people often drill and something to be worthwhile looking for is on surface roots. So if you've got roots that are close to the surface, really easy to drill, poison, and then cover over. And where you see death of tissue, you can follow that tissue along, and that'll often give you some hint as to where the tree's been poisoned. So, yeah, Matthew, it's just soul destroying for me. You know, I'm happy to say unapologetically that I look forward to the day when somebody gets arrested, put in jail, and in the process of being put in jail, get beaten the crap out of them, so that people realise that it's not something you want to take a risk on. And certainly in the last 5 years in Sydney, there's just been this spate of poisoning public trees. Again, Brighton Les Sands today, 2 trees in the main avenue of Norfolk Island pines that cover either side of the main drag through Brighton Les Sands have been poisoned, and it's public property. And the funniest thing is that, again, Matthew, if you call your local police, they'll just say, and they won't necessarily, but the normal comment is, what do you think?
They're only trees.
It's just a tree. It's a tree. And I might have shared this before, and if I have, I apologise for sharing again, but I had a class that did interpret legislation. We'd go along and watch a court case, and this particular one, we're not ever allowed to mention the name of the people, so we affectionately called her Miss Booty. Miss Booty was a cantankerous young lady who was got upset with a shop that she was in. She was accused of shoplifting. Not that she was shoplifting that day, she says, but she had been caught there before shoplifting, and so she got upset with the teller and threw his glasses onto the ground. Didn't break them. Unfortunately, a shopper walking around didn't see them, trod on them and broke them. So she was charged with malicious damage in New South Wales, Section 195 of the Crimes Act, exactly the same act that this would be covered under in the Crimes Act. And by the time they got to court, she'd already paid for the repair of the glasses. They were $300 odd. And that's fair enough, just a set of reading glasses. But I'm wondering what it would cost, do you reckon, to buy a 400-litre Pyrus and put it in the ground?
My guess is it'd be a bit more than that.
My guess is it'd be a couple of $1,000s at least. And so this is more expensive than Miss Booty's damage, and yet here it's nothing. And I think I might have mentioned this before too. It's interesting, my young lad, my youngest boy, when he was young, was driving a Holden Commodore, fell asleep, ran into a Telstra pole. Telstra sent him the bill. The pole was still standing, but obviously it had to be replaced because it had been hit. No problems at all. But if you run a car into a tree on council property or government property, the police don't call anybody. It's just a tree. So hopefully we'll see that change in the next sort of 10 or 15 years, but it certainly hasn't been quick to change to date. Okay. I think we've dealt with that one, didn't we, Peter? Cabling? We did
Yes,
indeed.
we did. Yeah, we did. But I would not have an objection to you going over it again briefly.
Just cabling's okay, has its place, very structural, doesn't allow the tree to adapt. So our preference would be for a dynamic system over a static system, unless you're trying to hold the inevitable failure up. So the tree's actively splitting, a couple of bolts through is probably the appropriate option there. Let me pull up some I just saw on the Arborist site, the Australian Arborist Network. It's got nothing to do with the Arborist Network as in us. It's got something to do with just a Facebook group. That's interesting enough. If you haven't seen it, it's interesting to go and have a look-see at.
Green back, but now we've lost. I know you're on mute.
Yeah, I've got it unmuted. Thanks, Peter.
Okay.
Entire screen, share. Please, it says don't do this. So there we are doing it. And okay. Went to the site today. Can you see that? Yep, you can. I can see what you can see now. Do you think that's good tree protection?
It's better than
bad?
nothing.
Sorry?
It's better than nothing.
It's better than nothing. Yeah, there's some gravel and waste concrete as they've done their pours. There was a driveway here originally. That's gone. I look at it and I think that's pretty horrible tree protection. Interesting, I looked at the site 9 years ago. 9 years ago, the DA was approved. They started work 3 years ago. I suggested they might just do a little bit of cleaning up and tidying up, maybe put some form of protection down, ground protection. But there's the canopy, nice, green and flushing. Now that I've got a flushing canopy, what does that tell me?
Well, the tree's still growing. It's
Tree's growing.
Getting a bit of water.
Yeah, its root system is adequate to supply the current requirements and allow for growth. So our root crown ratio is in balance. If I didn't have enough roots, it wouldn't flush. So flushing tells me there's adequate absorbing roots. So 2 years after, or almost 3 years after they've started stuffing around with the tree still looks amazingly good. Now, what does the builder learn as a result of seeing that?
It's okay to leave his wheelbarrow lying around under the tree. It's not really doing that much damage.
His wheelbarrow, his sand, his plastic, all of that stuff. In fact, he knows that I wasn't worth paying. Because I said he had to have all this protection stuff in, and he's not doing it.
Mm.
And so,
well, it's not ideal. It's not great what they've done, but on the other hand, just having that material littered around there, etc., isn't sufficient to cause the tree to become unviable.
No, and what it does in part teach us is it takes a hell of a lot to get to that stage. So, when I see a tree on a development site that's looking sick and dying, I know that's usually not just a few small transgressions. It's usually some major transgression that's occurred. So that's always going to be the case. Now, I can't remember why I was coming over. Oh, I know. The Arborist website, yeah. If I saw a tree like that, I would just simply cut it down. I don't think something like that is worth saving where you've got fracturing all the way up. But, you could if you wanted to. You could start putting in a series of bolts and working it. I would say that's a pointless exercise. So that I thought was a pretty bad example. That's just showing you that trees can grow around. Thing that's a rifle that ended up inside the inside of a tree. This I thought was really instructive and intuitive. This is a anyone guess?
So fungal.
Yeah, so it's fungal fruiting body. We like a nice technical name for that called a sporocarp because it makes it sound very photosynthesis. It's always good to have some big words to use, as long as we use them correctly. So sporocarp simply means the fruiting body of the fungus that holds the spore. And it's phylinous. So we've got a nice phylinous fruiting body. And there was some discussions about it because the tree got hit by a cyclone, and this is the damage it did. Now, several things that are fascinating. First of all, it didn't fail completely, but close enough. But that's cyclonic winds. And I have a question. If it didn't fail here, is it possible the same tree would have failed elsewhere? In other words, if it didn't have a Phalaenus fruiting body, could it have potentially failed regardless?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Phalaenus doesn't tell us anything. In a cyclone, for something to fail is almost of non-issue, because things will have failed like the other tree you saw with the split without a Phalaenus fruiting body, without anything wrong. So, what we're good at saying is I can see a correlation, and there is, between this one and the next one. See the correlation. See that there's some causation. That makes sense. But what I don't know is whether that was inadequate or not. I would say my view of it is that's adequate. So typically, fruiting bodies of fungi we just ignore when they're Phalaenus. Well, whatever it is now, Phalaenus badius is probably what it is now. It's pretty interesting. This is just a tree responding to a foreign body. It's producing woundwood and it's growing over it. Okay, so there's some wires coming either side. And that goes back to the question. I've raised it before, and I'm sure someone smart will do it. A young guy called Ryan Darrington's trying it at the moment on his property, and that is going ahead and grafting a foreign body between two tight forks in a union and getting it to go across higher. If you can get it to go across higher up, you get rid of the included bark. You get rid of the included bark, you get back to full strength. And so he is using woundwood to do that. And I've showed you before, I'm pretty sure, Clara, New South Wales.
Double L.
Yeah, I had double L, Peter.
Okay.
Single L, maybe. Yeah, single L. I'll go back to that in a few seconds. Go back to that one in a few seconds. But here it is. This is a metal obstacle that's been put in the between the tree. The tree has grown over. I know it's unusual, but there's no way that's included, even if the bit down the bottom here was included. So by grafting in a synthetic material to grow over, you'll get a result. What would be the ideal sort of synthetic materials to use from an arborist point of view?
Plastic.
Plastic, yeah. So some form of plastic, I agree, or resin, or something that's soft that you can cut with a chainsaw, is not going to screw up your life if you have to do something like later on. So plastics are great. And so plastics and lanolin are, I think, the key to that process. Lanolin stimulates callus division. Callus then forms woundwood. And so putting it in a smaller union, and it probably would have gone better off down here where my mouse is at the bottom rather than up there, but it just shows you it can be done. This is an accidental example, but I'm sure that in the next 5 or 10 years, we'll be doing this intentionally.
Yeah.
We'll be, instead of bolting and instead of reducing stems, we retain the tree, encouraging the two to go across and graft, and then once that's done, all's finished. So one of you or a couple of you might want to try it at some stage. As I said, Ryan Darrington is at the moment. I don't know how Ryan's going, but he is getting there.
Do you have to wound the tree to encourage the growth, or can you?
Yes, you have to wound each side to put your insert into, your solid insert, and then let it grow over that insert.
Yeah.
But you're only wounding it down to wood, so you're just making a small injury to the bark, and then letting that insert itself in.
Yeah.
So it's got potential to resolve the problem. I said I took about a couple of these quickly, and again, it doesn't matter where I go. This is typical sort of tree protection. That's the sort of stuff I'm showing you. Doesn't matter whose side it is. 9 out of 10 times, somebody's going to get consent and then ignore it. Why?
Well, as our other builder has shown, you can do all that stuff to the tree and it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And if it doesn't matter, then we're not going to get into hassles or troubles for it. This is interesting here. This is a branch that was badly cut, and it's typical. Got a little bit of borer damage here. But what do you notice about it, and what do you know from it?
The
Too
center of
close cut at the bottom. Yeah, go on.
the center of the branch appears to be very much offset.
Yeah. What we're getting is a lot of trop tissue put down the bottom. So a lot of this normal tissue at the bottom of the branch, giving it strength. And in any situation where you're close to the trunk, preferentially the tree's going to put in angiosperms, a lot more tissue down the bottom. So almost no tension wood here. We go looking for tension wood, we're not going to find it. We have to go further out on a branch to find tension wood. It's worthwhile keeping that in mind. We didn't know that in a lot of our earlier books, and so there's a number of people in our industry that just don't have that right. Does anyone recognize this?
Myrtle rust.
Myrtle rust.
Myrtle rust, yeah. So it's still out there. It's causing some damage, predominantly with what sort of trees do you see it on?
Myrtaceae.
Myrtaceae, yes, very good. That's why they call it myrtle rust. But I don't see it a lot except on young saplings occasionally, and then on a couple of larger trees where we get it a lot. And Syzygium jambos is one that we get it a lot on. It's a really good indicator tree for myrtle rust. So worthwhile keeping an eye out for that. For that reason, I wouldn't plant Syzygium jambos. The end of the branch has been cut off. Obviously, you've got a problem here. What's the problem?
Is that
Branch-
sun damage?
This here is cracked. That means that at one stage this branch was up here. The end of that branch was up here. It would have gone up here. This is a hazard beam failure. A hazard beam failure occurs where a branch has a curve in it, usually quite a strong curve, and is loaded, and the inside radius is shorter than the outside radius. So as it tries to straighten it out, the inside separates from the outside along the neutral plane, or the plane where it fits between the part that's in tension and the part that's in compression. And hazard beams are usually fairly strong, so there was probably no need to cut the end off, although occasionally they do fail. The last one, I think, well, there's two. This one was again from that Arborist Network site, and you can see this is a bunya, and you'll see this frequently in araucarias with co-dominant stems. It's just dealing with it perfectly. You almost never see araucaria with co-dominant stems with one stem failing. And a part of the reason is I have tissue running this way and this way. So this is a knot and a half. Trying to split through this is an impossibility in many ways. And so nature leaves it alone. They've figured it out themselves. Agathis do the same thing. And you'll often see Agathis robusta with co-dominant stems and failures above the co-dominant stem. The unions are just so strong.
Mark, if
Yes.
you were formally pruning them, would you still prune them to one stem even though they're unlikely to fail?
No, I wouldn't.
You would?
And I'd prefer not to or remove codominant stems. Let's say this tree here. Let's say that was a little tighter. I mean, I've got a bit of necrosis and an old branch here. Maybe there is some point in pruning that, but it's also close to the building. I mean, there's a whole pile of things here. In this case, we've got the Department of Education who doesn't think about trees. So this tree will never get any bigger, never get any fatter, never push on the adjacent building. So they're going to site these site sheds as close as they can to it. Of course, it will get bigger. It will push on the building, and that's just a part of the process. One of the latest things that is a real fad in schools in the Sydney region is to put decks around them. And I now have a standard clause in my reports because I've got to say to them, increase the opening in the deck. Increase the opening in the deck. The other thing it does is I can't see below that deck. I don't know who Superman is. I'm sure he exists, but I'm not he. I can't see through that deck. And so I don't get to see what's happening at the base of the tree. And, every now and again I'll see things like a lesion, inverted wound that comes up past the deck. And I think, well, is that like that because someone might cut the root or damage the tree or what? I can't see. In those situations, I ask them to cut a manhole into the deck so that we can get in underneath and have a look. And when you're my size, that's just not a small little, 30 centimeter by 30 centimeter hole. That's I want 75 by 60 so I can get in and have a proper look. So it's just a fad that people are going through, and that's fine. A good reminder, I went out, the school has been inspected less than 12 months ago. That failure occurred whilst I was there. I just leaned on the tree, pushed it, and then it went, pushed on that one and it went, pushed on that one and it went. 3 trees in a matter of 5 minutes that were pushovable. If you're doing a risk assessment and you've got the opportunity to load test, then please do. Just please push on the tree and see what happens at that point. Just as a refresher for a couple, does anyone remember what we know now causes this?
Was that agronomy?
It looks a lot like agronomy, Lisa, except it's a lot thinner. It's in sheets. But exactly the same, what you call xylophageous feeding. So you're absolutely right, same feeding habit. Can anyone remember?
Tail ants, whatever. The muscle man ants.
This is a jewel beetle. Okay, and we know the beetle we've known about for over 100 years. But we didn't know that it ate eucalyptus until very recently, and we didn't know that it was xylophageous until very recently. So it causes internal damage. Can you see that?
Yep.
No.
Yep.
No indicator on it. So when something falls in a school, and it will, or in a client's house, and it will, you're not going to necessarily see it here. Different. We've got a little bit, I don't know whether you can see it down here, a little bit down the bottom. This is ray attack, and this is a brown rot here. Can you see it from the outside? So parts are going to fail, doesn't matter what we do at all. How about this? Does anyone recognize this guy? Is here. No. This is a white punk, Latioporus portentosus, and it is a brown rot. It's one of 2 brown rots that affect eucalypts on a common basis. The other one is the curry punk. The dilemma with this particular fungus is it's ephemeral. You won't see it 2 months later, 3 months later, it'll be gone. whereas most of the other bracket fungi are long-lived.
So the fruiting body's ephemeral, but the actual fungi would be.
Yeah,
still
sorry.
there.
Thanks, Peter. Yep. So the good thing is on a big stem like this, it's probably not going to have much of an impact. On a small branch like this, it may have more of an impact. It'll lead to what we call a brittle failure. And so we've got ray attack and a brittle failure here in the one branch. So could it be that it's come from here? It's possible. It's possible it's got multiple infections. And the work by a lady called Professor Limbodi suggests that a lot of these fungi are sitting in the tree as endobionts, or things that are already there as single cells, like a yeast type structure, waiting for the tree to get injured. In the meantime, they're protecting the tree gets injured, and they say, great, we're going to take advantage of the dead tissue and go for it now. What's the risk like from that?
Low.
Low. Okay, low, Peter. Intuitively, why?
It doesn't look like there's anything much it could damage or injure if it failed.
That's right. So it's going to depend on the target beneath it. Maybe that was outside a bus stop. That might be a little bit more of a concern. On a rural country road, which is what it was on, it was just a great example of how things can just sit there. And that's probably been like that for a couple of weeks. And maybe there in a year's time, who knows? I'm forever amazed at how long it does take. And this is, you got to yay to this one. This is a roundabout in Blacktown Council. I love my local council. And so they built this structure. This is an artificial tree with little birdhouses in it. Am I mistaken something, or is that just nowhere near as spectacular as the tree?
Yep.
Probably could have got 100 trees for the price of that piece of crap. I just mind boggled when I drove past it. And again, I'm not good at art, so I'm not the one to talk about whether that's good art or not. Partial failure, we're talking about earlier on. Could you bolt that back together? Boy, I'd have to have a really good argument why. It'd have to be someone's grandmother planted the tree, and she's now deceased, and she's dear to you, and it's the most valuable tree. But in this case, this stem is dead on this side, and so yeah, you could get rid of the whole thing, but one cut down here, I've just given them a rough indicator, proper final cut at that spot, and keep the tree. I don't see a need to get rid of it. Now, what do you think the risk associated with this one's like, Peter?
I'd need to see what the target was before you could speak to that.
Okay, so we're in a school.
Looks like it's in a school. Looks like it's in a least heavily used part of the school. So
In a fairly heavily used part, but this branch is firmly caught up in this part of the tree, and this is a covered awning. So this is probably a 2 meter wide covered way here.
so
When's
if the tree failed, then it wouldn't really do anything.
Yeah, that's right. So it still came down. Oddly enough, we've used the BTRA, the ISA system, Basic Tree Risk Assessment. It's low. If you're using VALID or QTRA, then it's broadly acceptable. And so then this just becomes a maintenance item. And that's a very different approach than what we have traditionally handled as arborists. As arborists, we'd say, oh, it's high risk, you've got to do with it straight away. The reality is the risk is more than acceptable, but the tree will be better off and the environment will be better off with that particular branch cut off, and that's it. So again, it's interesting. You can have some significant problems, and
If that little branch is tangled up in the other trees, though, then it's not going to do anything if it fails. So why would you even bother chopping it off?
Look, you probably wouldn't have to, Peter, but maintenance work is not stuff that you have to do. Maintenance stuff is stuff that you do because there are other benefits. So, for example, it might one day fall out when you don't want it to, and just be sitting around and be a pain in the neck. The dead bit here, this stem holder stem is dead up there. It might fall on the roof when you don't want it to. It might scare somebody. You can see the two parts of the roof. The one bit finishes there, and then the awning bit comes here. So, yeah, look, maintenance work is work that can be done, but doesn't need to be done. And, lots of things in maintenance fit that same way in your car. For example, do you need to change the oil in your car from a safety point of view?
No.
No? Why would you do it? It's expensive. I'm just going to stop doing it. What's the problem with that?
It shortens the life of the motor.
Yeah, I'm going to pay for it later on. So, the later on situation here is if that tore down further, you might end up losing this branch here as well, or you might end up with somebody panicking and removing the whole tree. So maintenance work can still have value without having to force people to do it. It's got value inherently, like we paint our house periodically because that's what we need to do. We mow our lawns. We don't have to mow our lawns. We can let the lawns grow long, but they look better when they're mowed. Trees look better when they're cared for.
Yeah, I think that it's, for me, it's an aesthetic issue.
What's the aesthetic issue, Peter?
Oh, well, it looks better if it's pruned neatly.
Yeah, I get that. And there's a whole school of art, and I think I've talked about this before. The Heidelberg School of Art is when we started to draw trees with dead branches. Prior to that, of course, God's creation couldn't have dead branches. You just don't put them in the tree. And there's still something really nice about going out and looking at a brush box that's had every dead branch you can find down to about 5 millimeters in diameter knocked out. The tree just looks pristine and wonderful because it's not natural, but it does look wonderful. And, we do that with lots of things, the human body. We do it with the human body regularly. So someone asked about cabling and bracing last time, and we touched on it again this time. And here's one again that I came across in the last couple of weeks. This stem on the jacaranda that we're concerned about, it's not too bad. The union's, in my mind, quite acceptable. But they've chucked a catcher system in, a restraint system. And I like them. It's just a little bit of added protection. But there are things I don't like about them. And I don't like when you use a piece of rope and put a cable clamp in. Now, if the person that did it's online or the person that did it finally gets this, I apologize for what I'm about to say in advance, but you've got to have some fun. I was asked by a colleague, do I know the name of the arborist that did it? And I said, no. This arborist has got an IQ such that they won't be able to remember their name to tell me. That is just plain lunacy. The reason you use a cable clamp on cables is because they're hard to splice and you can't tie them. The reason you use rope is because it's flexible and you can tie it. A re-threaded figure of 8 knot would have done far better job, and it wouldn't have put. This is just horrible. This is just absolute madness. So, we still as arborists do these weird and wonderful things, and I just sit there and I think, what were they thinking? Or better still, why didn't they think? And even then, at least one of these should be facing the other side. There's just nothing about this that is desirable. So my comment was they can just leave it to, decay away or break away. If it doesn't do it in the next 5 or 10 years, then we'll cut it. But that's just madness. And it's not just arborists that have this issue. This is a recently planted tree in a school. This is a $25-30 million development in a school. This is the landscaping. What is wrong with this? Anyone?
Well, eventually that if the tree grows, then it will bump up against that hard grating and cause problems with the tree will overgrow it.
Yeah. How hard was it to plant it in the middle? I mean,
But
you know,
also, is the planting hole the size of that grill, or is the grill just covering the tiles?
the planting hole is presumably bigger, but somebody set that out, laid it out. So, you know, ultimately it's a landscaping error. The others were on the site were in the right spot. That one was in the wrong spot. And you've got to ask yourself the question as to how they can get it so wrong. And it's just typical of arboriculture, of horticulture, of our whole green industry is you're going to have these issues facing us forever. And I don't think that's bad. But I do think that it does have some problems and issues. Just get you a couple of other good, interesting shots. What do you think we're looking at? The hint is here.
Is it a fungus?
No, but I can see why you say that. These are roots. This is the edge of a pot. Someone left a ficus on the ground that was pot bound.
Mm.
And that's the mess made. It wasn't cut down because it was pot bound. Interestingly enough, it was cut down because it was pushing into the adjacent structure, which is this fence here. But isn't it amazing just that it's filled up a pot so perfectly and then it's broken the pot and you can see then it started to go a little bit crazy. So, yeah, I thought it was great to catch that. And, you know, when you're out there, the things that you want to be looking at all the time. This is a palm tree, and we don't talk about palms that much. But does anyone know what sort of palm tree this is and why? Does anyone know what this green structure wrapped around the trunk is called?
Sheath?
Yeah, close. Starts with S or CS, 2 words.
The crown shaft.
Crown shaft. That's it. Excellent. So we've got a crown shaft here. So we've got a native palm in this instance. This is a Contophenix. There are others that have got crown shafts, but this particular one has a flower that's purple in colour. And it's one of the ways you can identify a Contophenix Cunninghamiana. Is it Cunninghamiana or Cunninghamii? A Contophenix should be Cunninghamiana, I think. Is by the purple flower. Alexander palm, which looks fairly similar, has a white flower rather than a purple colour flower. There's another one that's less common, and that's a Contophenix atropurpurea, or one from the Illawarra area, and I'm not sure what colour flower it's got, but it's a somewhat distinctly looking different palm.
You were right the first time. It's Hamiana.
Cunninghamiana, yeah. I hate Latin. So one that's worth having a quick discussion about is this one here. This is a tree with a questionable union. On the other side of that union, everything is good. So there's just one branch here. The branch has already had some weight cut back off it. I'll go zoom in. And I've got a small crack here. Can you see it? And this is what Matic calls a cupboard door failure. That is, it's failing on one side only and not the other side. Does anyone know what causes that? No. Bad union. Okay, well, we've got lots of those. And rotational forces. So this branch has been heavily loaded. And so that's what causes it. So it's a wind coming from that direction that's opened that up. That could be just a one-off event, a strong wind, a microburst. Who knows what's caused it? Could deal with it by doing some reduction pruning on these pieces here. For a tree, this is a Eucalyptus pilaris. It should have a single stem. It's an appalling specimen. I would just say reducing it back down to here is probably an easier option. Maybe at some stage or other doing the same with a couple of the other lower bits. Although I have to say I have seen pilaris grow as a mallee. And when I said to you, I see this deck, there's 2 lots in 1 week at least, and you can see here it is now pushing on. This is Eucalyptus grandis. It's one of my least favorite school trees because it's so quick and big. That is a probably 25 to 35-year-old tree, and it wants the full 5 to 10 centimeters because in a good year, it will put 3 centimeters of new thickening on. So, the people that do this are landscape architects and landscapers, and they just don't believe that trees are living things. They haven't figured that out yet. I don't understand why, but they do struggle with that process.
Mark, quickly, just while you're talking about reduction pruning, saw David Evans' post the other day on LinkedIn about weight reduction. Do you just refer to it just as reduction pruning?
Yeah, look, David's comment is that we use it far too often, and I'd agree with him. I'm not of the view that you want to go and reduce every long limb. The concept of an overextended limb is largely an urban myth. So why would you do it? Well, you might do it, for example, on this, because we've had a failure. Okay, and I know we talked about this last time we got together. This is Eucalyptus creba up near Peter's end of the world. It failed when Lisa was a student in my class, and the damn thing is still standing because that's only 4 weeks or 3 weeks ago, January the 22nd. There we are. That's just so recent. It's ridiculous. What have these things got to do to fail? And the answer is they don't always fail. So a couple of options here. A capture system would be nice to be in the top third of the tree. So somewhere up higher up here for the system. We're going to do that. Too late now to bolt it at all. It's just, not even worth it, I don't think. But some weight reduction on the stem that's going out this side might help. And weight reduction, you don't get a lot of weight reduction by going out to the end, but you get the greatest amount per unit cut towards the end. What you don't want to do is cut off so much foliage that the tree can't keep on strengthening itself here. And so that's the balance. And so that's what David's saying, and I think he's right, is that, you're cutting off. Well, in fact, we can do it. We'll look it up now.
Just going on that, I think part of it he was trying to say that we should stop saying weight reduction, because then people are trying to take bigger cuts because they want to reduce substantial weight, where he's sort of suggesting that we called it load reduction or something.
That's right. It is the load that other parts put on it, and the loads are put on by gravity. So it's you pick up the brick and you put it out a long way, and so that reduces the load in here, and also wind load. The longer it is, the greater the leverage. And we can look at the weight, and I'll do that now for you because I think it's instructional. It's worthwhile. If we cut a 5 centimeter branch off, we're cutting a dry weight of 6 kilograms, so maybe 10 to 12 kilogram of weight by cutting a 5 centimeter branch. That's not a lot of weight, of a tree. Let's say we've got a tree with like that one that we just looked at, maybe 40 centimeter diameter trunk. It's got a total mass of 977 kilos dry weight. So again, let's say probably 1,600 moist weight, maybe a tad more because it's an iron bark, not a lot more. you know, that few kilograms is not a lot of weight. And so he's absolutely right. And it's not a lot of weight at that point. But what it does is it takes the load because of the length of the lever. If we shorten that lever arm, we reduce the load at the union.
Yeah.
Yep. He's absolutely correct. And again, it's not something that we need to do all the
And he's gone.
Lost you, Mark. Got your screen, but not you presenting. If you can hear me. And you're on mute.
see this lovely little button, you think, yeah, I've got to delete that screen. And I'm working all of a sudden on the wrong computer. So I tried closing down the Excel spreadsheet. So that's Triton and Hornbeck's calculator. Doesn't matter what elementary equation you use, they're all within a ballpark of each other. So there's a little thing. The other thing that's instructive, talking about David Evans, David and I were having some discussions, and we've both been playing around with AI to do some calculations on the distribution curve of trees in the unacceptable and then in the tolerable range. Does anyone not understand that concept? Right, in the assumption that everyone said. So if you don't and you're listening in after the event, look up tolerability of risk framework. It gives us some thresholds. So unacceptable risk to someone else is somewhere from 1 in 10,000 or higher risks, so 1 in 1,000, 1 in 100. Tolerability of risk framework range for tolerable is somewhere between 1 in 10,000 and 1 in a million. And so those are the ranges that we're looking at. And if I can find DeepSeek, the Chinese one, was very nice to me. I had 7 minutes of grinding the system to a halt at their expense doing the calculations, which was lovely. And we finally came up with some really useful figures that will help you in risk assessment. I just got to find it again because it didn't open up. There we are. Okay. I'll zoom in just so you can read it later on. So I asked it to follow a basic process and said, figure this out. It's gone through. There's about 30 odd pages prior to this, but here's its end conclusion. To get 2 deaths. Now, there are 5 deaths a year in Australia from accidental tree failure, but my assumption is that somewhere between 1 and 2 of those occur during inclement weather on a part that, became high risk seconds or minutes beforehand or hours beforehand. It's not something that I could have seen the day before, a month beforehand, a week beforehand. It's something that's been very recent because of the wind conditions. Or they are faults like those branches that we've looked at today, where it's all internal and I'm not going to have any idea that it's there, but it still fails just at the moment that someone's there. So the assumption is that we can probably prevent 2 deaths a year in Australia by inspections. We can prevent more than that by giving people the message, stay indoors during inclement weather. That if everyone did that, we'd save 4, but doing the risk assessment, we can save 2. And we worked out that there's about 16,000 trees in that unacceptable range throughout the entirety of Australia. 16,000 trees and 40,000 trees in the tolerable range. And that gives us roughly 1.6 deaths and roughly 0.4 deaths. That's 2 deaths. 2 deaths are going to occur in those high tour categories. Rarely will you get a tree in the 1 in 5 million causing harm, because you need, a fair few of them to lead to that death. And we've done that already with our ones that we've eliminated out. What this works out is about 50,000 trees in rough round figures, 50,000 trees over 10 million trees, close enough to one tree in every 1,000 trees is something that we're looking for. So if you're going out somewhere and you're assessing 100 trees and you come back with
Sorry, Mark,
10 trees,
could you just run that again?
I'll
You
do it
just
with a calculator, Peter.
No, you just faded out. dropped
Sorry.
out at the critical when you announced the number.
So we've got 50,000 trees over the 50 million trees that we've got in suburban areas. That's about 1 in 1,000 trees is either tolerable or unacceptable. 1 in 1,000 trees, tolerable or acceptable. So if I'm looking at 100 trees somewhere, I'm not going to find in almost any circumstances 5 trees that pose an unacceptable or tolerable risk. That's just far
all the
too
rest
high.
are broadly acceptable.
All the rest are broadly acceptable. And so it's a really good benchmarking tool for yourself to say, how often do I say, and if you're using BTRA, I'd say if you're saying high or even medium, it probably should be in that maybe 1 in 100 because that's less scaled, it's less reliable. But you shouldn't be going to a school and finding 45 out of 200 trees posing a moderate risk. It's just fanciful. If you go into the statistical side, you can say, well, there's 1 in 1,000 chance that I'm going to find one. What's the chance I'm going to find 18 in the same school? And I looked at that where that's what the previous risk assessment had. And I worked out that that's like winning Oz Lotto 5 times consecutively. Now, I don't find that believable. In fact, I'm pretty sure that if I were to win Oz Lotto twice in a row, I'd have a couple of burly blokes in blue or Sheilas, I don't care either way, knocking on my door saying, Mr. Hartley, we'd like to have a discussion with you. We're concerned that you're up to skullduggery. Of course, when I win it the 3rd week, there's going to be some guys in dark suits down. The detectives are going to be in then. Okay. The 4th time round, I'm going to have people stoning me because they just think that I've conned the system, I'm a crook. Okay. And the 5th time, they're going to lock me up regardless of whether I actually did win it randomly 5 times in a row, because there happen to be fewer particles in the universe than the likelihood of me doing that. And so I look at it and think, yeah, that person probably overestimated the risk. And it was interesting to watch one of the reactions there. One of the schools I looked at recently had a BTRA, basic tree risk assessment, the track one. The one that tracks shows you, tracks the qualification, the risk assessment's basic tree risk assessment. They did the BTRA, and every tree around this dead tree had occasional use. But somehow or other, everyone could sneak in to underneath the dead tree, and then it became frequent use. Why did they change the usage from occasional to frequent for that one tree?
To get the result thereafter.
Yeah, we all want to do it, myself included. I'm not excluded, which is why you need to benchmark yourself. It's why it's useful to say, is the result that I'm getting, is it about consistent with what we're saying? Now, I do come up with a little less than 1 tree in 1,000 in the school environment, but my argument is I should, because thousands and thousands and thousands of trees have already been removed. So the likelihood is a little lower than 1 in 1,000. So that gives me some benchmark. Yes, my actual risk assessments come in line with what we know now mathematically. As I said, this is not a perfect answer, but this is a good reasoned middle position. Okay, there are some issues with how we deal with the bits, but it'll be close enough. You happy with that, guys?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought it was a useful piece of information. Eventually, we'll crunch it down more than that and get it to graph it, but it's going to be in that level. In other words, level if you've got 2 trees in 1,000, I wouldn't be panicking as an arborist. If you've got 3 trees in 1,000, I'd start to say, well, maybe you need to recalibrate. If you're getting 10 trees in 1,000, definitely need recalibration. If you're getting 1 tree in every 10,000, you probably, again, need to be careful that you're not being underestimating the risk. So that gives you just a good working range. And you can do that, fairly quickly by just doing a rough head count and saying, yeah, okay, I've done 10 sites now like that and 5 sites like that, and you can come up with those figures fairly quickly for yourself. And
You're going to
when
present something. You're going to present the information at the next conference?
Not the next conference. The next conference, I'm talking about how transplanting has changed in my lifetime since my first one in 1972 to the way it's happening now, and just looking how innovation and technology has changed. I've got I'll probably do a 1-day workshop on risk completely outside the risk assessment systems. Between now and the end of the year, I'll start to do it, run that around Australia, and we'll look at the common mistakes in tree risk assessment. What is risk in itself, common mistakes, how to communicate it better. And then I know that Stands Australia is the committee EVE 018, I think it is currently looking at developing a standard for tree risk assessment. That standard is not saying how it's to be done, but it's saying what elements and components are required. So, for example, if you said, look, that tree poses a broadly acceptable risk, it doesn't really matter. If you said, look, it poses an elevated risk, it's an unacceptable risk. Well, how do you get that? We want to know what the components are. We want to know what the target of concern is, what part you think is going to fall. And I dealt with a fairly public one recently, and it's interesting, the arborist assessing it said a branch might fall. And that's a really interesting answer, because my response to that is, let me know which branch and I'll cut it. If it's just a branch might fall, that's true of all branches. So we'll just cut off 4 branches off all trees. I'll cling wrap you up, and when you're suffocating, you'll realize you're an idiot. It's just plain faulty thinking. Okay, a branch might fail is not. It's just simply saying there's a background risk associated with branches falling, and we know that happens. We know that lots of branches fall, huge numbers, and we know that almost none of them kill anybody. That's just the reality. How many of you have seen a branch that's fallen off a tree in the last month?
Yep.
Just today, I saw a dead branch down the local park, probably 15 centimetres in diameter, maybe 2 metres in length. If that had hit somebody, it would have killed them. And near misses simply tell us that we need to consider the risk. We as civilians, and this is part about communicating risk, as civilians, we're used to hearing the phrase, that almost killed me. Almost killed you means that you're in hospital, in intensive care for weeks before they finally pulled you out. You were so close that it almost died. Missing you altogether simply means you're a loser. Okay, didn't hit you at all. That's not an almost kill. That's like saying, I was 10 numbers off on the lottery, so I was almost a millionaire. No, you were nowhere near a millionaire. You just got $10 poorer. So
I was driving down the road today, and a truck nearly hit me.
Yeah, it could have killed you, Peter. You were almost killed by it.
Yeah, sure it was. I was on a motorbike. It would have killed me, I reckon.
Yeah, well, thank you for being a mobile organ donor, Peter. Although I don't know that Vietnam's going to be too good a place to donate your organs. So hurry up back to Australia. You are in Vietnam, aren't you, Peter?
I am.
Amazing, isn't it? Here we are, half the way around the world, and having this working. It's great. Any other questions, guys? If there's no other questions, thanks for everyone for being here tonight. Anyone got a question?
No,
going?
but I will maybe next session, Mark.
You've
was
got
gonna
one for
ask-
next?
Yeah,
go on.
I've got a couple of questions I was going to ask you if you could run through site plans, just a bit of, looking at.
How to read them?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm happy to give a go at that. They're horrible things, and they're often cumbersome and clunky. And I just got the news from my office. They said, you're going through the archives. We're getting in a paper shredder, again, a big industrial one, going through the old archives. You don't need any paper plans anymore. We haven't used one in 20 years. And I really do have to say I miss paper plans. It's one thing that's changed, and I don't know how other people find it, but I get a massive big site, and I've got a big monitor. I've got a 24-inch monitor, and I look at it on the 24-inch monitor, and I think, why do they do this? And then they've got 20 layers on it, and you zoom in or zoom out, and 2 minutes later, it's finally done the rendition of the planet that zoom. It's just a pain. Paper was nice, but yes, I'm happy to look at plans. What else, Lisa?
Thank you. I, off the top of my head right now, I'm not quite sure, but I'll come up with some things I'll send through to Peter. Some questions and photos. Thank you.
Yep. Again, happy to deal with anything. Peter, did we have any other mentors on tonight? I didn't check. I should have checked. I apologise.
I don't, not that I know of.
Okay. Yeah, just getting back into the swing of things this year has been a little bit slower. So yeah, just keep sending things through to Peter. Peter's the screener. You make sure it goes to the right spot. If it's urgent, he'll get it through to me. And just a reminder to those others that aren't attending, but do send things in, like Will Mittens did. Thanks heaps.